The Atlanta Braves didn't protect Blake Burkhalter or any of the other Rule 5 eligible prospects before Tuesday's deadline. And I think I know why. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today for Wednesday, November 19th, your source for news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on social media at Crosby Baseball. Follow the show on X, Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and Instagram as well. You can find all my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. Now that I actually have internet access, both of those are back. So go check out, again, bravestoday.com. Free or paid, your subscriptions do help us out over there a ton. We're probably part of the Believe Podcast Network and presented to you by FanDuel. I keep chuckling how much the World Series odds just get tweaked here and there. I mentioned the other day the Braves were down with the Cubs and Brewers at plus 2,200. They've now come up to where the Padres are at plus 2,000. Obviously, a lot of that's just where the money's come in. But I find it really funny to see how not a lot is happening in the calendar right now as far as major additions, and yet the odds keep moving. In this case, Atlanta went back to where they were before they got dropped on Sunday. I want to talk about the Rule 5 protection deadline. We did a show on Monday talking about how Blake Burkhalter was a lock to get protected, and then you had some other marginal cases in David McCabe, Ian Mayhaw, guys like that. Egg on my face, the Braves didn't protect anybody. The Braves did not add anybody to their 40-man roster. And so I want to talk about that. I've got some theories about why they have these extra roster spots. But first, I want to talk about the fact that they didn't protect Blake Burkhalter. And I think it's very clear if you've watched this show, if you've read my work over at bravestoday.com, I am a fan of Blake Burkhalter. I got my start covering Auburn University baseball for Sports Illustrated for the 2021 season, which was his draft year with the Braves. Which was the season before he got drafted by the Braves. So I watched him for 2 years at Auburn, 21 and 22, and then watched him get drafted by the team that I was going to cover in the Atlanta Braves. And so I'll admit it's hard to be a little bit impartial about this, right? I know him, I've talked to him plenty of times. I've talked to people in his family. I was actually the one who broke the news that he was having Tommy John surgery in 2023 spring training. It wasn't somebody from the Braves beat. It wasn't somebody from the Athletic or the AJC or MLB.com. It was Lindsay Crosby writing for the Auburn site on Sports Illustrated, breaking the news he was having Tommy John. But when you look at why, the fact that he was not protected, I think there's an explanation here that can make sense. Because remember, we talked about this on Monday. He's a top 30 prospect for the Braves. He was the highest rated prospect of theirs who was unprotected at the deadline. He's number 11 on MLB Pipeline's top 30 for the Braves. And they did not protect him. And I know that sounds like, oh man, he is screwed. Somebody's going to take him, he's going to be gone. But I think Atlanta's making a calculated risk here. And I think it makes sense. So a reminder on the Rule 5 draft, in case you missed Monday's episode or whatever it was, quick reminder, if you select a player in the Rule 5 draft, you have to keep them on your major league roster all season. If you try to send them down to the minors, before you can do that, you have to offer them back to their original club, who can choose to take them back. And if I remember right, if they don't take them back, you then have to put them on waivers before you can send them down to the minors. So you're probably going to lose that guy. And so most Rule 5 picks don't even make it through spring training. Never mind, make it through the full season. But Baseball America did I'm going to call it a study, right? They wrote a piece on this. I'll link it in the show notes. It's behind a paywall, but if you're a member, you can read it. And if not, that's what I'm about to do right here, is kind of summarize this for you. They did I'm going to call it a study. They did a study going back to every Rule 5 draft from last season through 2020. Okay. And they looked at every single player that was taken. And they were looking at position, handedness, statistics, looking for the things that would lead to you being drafted, right? Like, what are the most common traits that these guys had? And the number one is just being a pitcher. Okay. 81% of all Rule 5 selections since 2020 have been pitchers. And the distribution between righties and lefties is more skewed here than it is in the league as a whole. In 2025, in the major leagues, it was 76% right-handers, 24% left-handers. So 1 in every 4 pitchers was a lefty in the majors last year. In the Rule 5 draft, 87% of pitchers taken are righties and 13% are lefties. Blake Burkhalter is a right-handed pitcher, so he fits the demographic, the highest level classification of guy who would be taken in the Rule 5 draft. Still not worried. Let me tell you why. The next most common trait that guys who are taken in the Rule 5 draft, pitchers specifically, have is either they did not pitch at all the previous season or did not pitch the full season because they were injured. And it's like 1 in 5 of the pitchers that were taken in the Rule 5 draft were either coming off of an injury or were injured the entire previous season. And the reason for this is a quirk in the Rule 5 rules. I mentioned they have to be on your major league roster all year, right? You have to, if you try to send them down to the minors, you have to give them back. But you are allowed to put them on the 60-day IL, provided that they spend 90 days on your MLB roster. So a guy who finished the previous year injured, you can break spring training with him on your 60-day IL. When he's eligible to come off, you can activate him, and then you only have to manage him through 3 months of the season versus the entire season to retain his rights and be able to send him down the next year. So it's a little bit of a quirk in the rules. You're given some allowance for injured list time, provided that they spend 90 days on the active roster, not on the injured list. So that's a little caveat there. And so, like, Burkhalter, he pitched all of 2025. He was not injured. He was coming off of Tommy John. He came back in mid-year 24 from Tommy John, but he pitched all of 25. So he does not fit that injury scenario. They look at upper minors experience, right? They said only 1 of the pitchers taken this decade had no experience in AA or AAA. Well, he has experience in both AA and AAA. That's what he did last year. So another situation where he fits the demographic of a guy who was taken in the Rule 5 draft. But I'm personally not worried because there are statistical milestones that MLB teams are looking for from their Rule 5 picks. And again, Baseball America did the study. In this decade, there are 3 areas where a very, very clear statistical trend came up in Rule 5 picks. Strikeouts, walks, and ground ball rate. Okay, so strikeouts. 4 out of every 5 pitchers taken in the Rule 5 draft had a strikeout rate over 26%. MLB average is just under 23%. So in the minors, the year before they were taken, they were striking out an above average percentage of batters. Better than 1 in every 4 batters, okay? And of those guys, 40% struck out 30% or more batters, which would have been like top 10% of Major League Baseball were that same number to be in the majors. Of the guys who did not strike out at the MLB average, just under 23%, of the 5 guys who did not strike out hitters, at that MLB average, which is lower, 4 out of the 5 guys also were really good about walking, like not walking batters. And when it comes to walks in general, 2 out of every 3 Rule 5 pitchers had a walk rate below 10%. And if they were over 10%, they had a really good strikeout rate. So it's like, and Baseball America worded this really well. If a pitcher had control issues, at least they could miss bats, right? It's that classic, like, you're throwing 100 miles an hour, like, if it plates up there somewhere, you're just firing heat, and guys are probably going to miss it. And then the third thing was ground balls. 3 out of every 4 Rule 5 pitchers taken were able to get ground balls more than 40% of the time. And MLB average is like 42%. So you're right there at league average at generating ground balls. So most often, the guys who were taken in the Rule 5 draft struck out an above average number of hitters. They walked a below average number of hitters. And they were at least MLB average in getting ground balls. And when you look at those statistics in comparison to what Blake Burkhalter did, makes a lot of sense why the Braves are taking this calculated risk. We'll break that down next, right here on Braves Today. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Encase Cards, and they have a new giveaway. This one gives you a chance to create something unforgettable. They're celebrating the athletes, parents, coaches, collectors, and fans who deserve their moment in the spotlight. Go to X. Encase Cards is their account. It's NCASE_cards. So Encase Cards. They have a pinned giveaway post. Reply to that post and tag your MVP, somebody who you think deserves their own custom Encase cards. You got to be following the account to qualify. Make sure you're following them. But the winning duo will get a free custom Encase card designed, printed, slabbed, and shipped. There's no catch. There's no purchase necessary. You just have to be following Encase Cards on X. You have to live in the U.S., U.S. entries only. The winner's chosen at random, and the giveaway ends this Thursday, November 20th. So you have today and tomorrow to enter, but you could walk away with a premium custom card that captures your MVP story. And if you don't win, promo code BRAVES today at ncasecards.com, ncasecards.com, will get you 20% off your order. Again, that's ncasecards, ncasecards.com, promo code BRAVES today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby. Let's talk about those statistics I gave in the last segment, and I'll refresh them. I know it's a lot of numbers in this show, and I apologize up front. I didn't give you a warning on that. Let's update with what Blake Burkhalter's numbers look like in relation to those. So when you're looking at his overall numbers, and he was AA to AAA last year, so this is all in the upper minors. Again, strikeout rate over 26% is what they're looking for. He was at 20.1%. Okay. A walk rate below 10%. He was at 10.3%. And a ground ball rate over 40%. He was at 40.6%. So he was well shy of the strikeout rate they're looking for. He was just over the maximum walk rate that they're okay with. And he was just barely over the minimum ground ball rate that they're looking for. And the thing here is his AA numbers and AAA numbers are different. He had different roles. He was a starter in AA. He was working in relief in AAA to manage his innings. And so in Gwinnett, he only made 2 starts in 18 appearances. He covered 31 innings. It's a total of 103 for the season. But 72 of those innings were in AA. And in AAA, his numbers were even farther away from those goals, right? Strikeout rate above 26%, remember, is the goal they're looking for. In AAA, 17.6%. He missed it by almost 10%. A walk rate below 10%. In AAA, he was at 12.2%. And again, they want a ground ball rate better than 40%. He was at 39.1% in AAA. So, bringing back an old chestnut here, 2 things can be true at once. I personally think Blake Burkhalter, the 4-pitch mix that he has, the mentality on the mound, his ability to throw strikes, the competitiveness, I think Blake Burkhalter is going to be a major league pitcher. His most likely role, if he is a starter, is a number 5. It's a back-end number 5 guy. A 5 and dive, gets a 6th inning, that kind of thing. Or he's going to be, a 7th, 8th inning guy in relief. But based on what he did last year, it's unlikely that there's another major league team that thinks he's ready for the major leagues now. It's entirely possible he debuts at some point in time for Atlanta in 2026. I feel like every single offseason, this kid adds something new to his arsenal. He adds something, he gets better at locating, he gets better at he gets more physical wise, gets more fitness, more muscle, more velo behind his pitches. He adds a pitch, whatever it might be. But there's a difference in him being in a major league bullpen on opening day and him getting called up in August or July. And I think, given the numbers we just looked at and how closely MLB teams have stuck with those standards in the Rule 5 draft in the last 5 years, it's likely that he's going to be safe, that he's not going to get selected in December. And if he does get selected by some other organization, because this is what usually happens with a Rule 5 pick, it's very likely that he makes it back to Atlanta by the end of spring training. Because if you bring one of those guys to camp and they don't make your team out of spring training, you offer them back then. You don't even wait for the season. They're not going to make your team in spring training. You can't, at any time, you can't send these guys to the minors until you offer them back to their original organization. So it's likely that he's not going to get picked, but even if he does, again, given the milestones they're looking for, it's entirely possible that he comes back to Atlanta before the season even begins. And again, this is not a slight on Blake Burkhalter. I think he's a fantastic player. I'm very excited to watch what he does. I actually have somebody sent me a slabbed Blake Burkhalter card that's right back here behind me. I actually believe it's autographed too, as a gift. Fantastic gift. Which, by the way, if you have a gift you want to send to the Braves Today Studios, I'm on social media. Reach out to me, DM. Hop in the Discord. You can get my info out of there. If you want to send a gift to us, if you're a sponsor, you want to send a product to us, feel free. I have a ton of sunflower seeds here from Chinook Seedery. But it kind of makes me, this whole situation with Blake Burkhalter, like, again, calculated risk. On paper, it looks like it should work out. But what's the plan here? And I think that this is really interesting as far as how much work Atlanta did to clean up the 40-man roster. We talked about this in early September. When you looked at all of the guys they had on the 60-day IL, and you look at how they kept grabbing guys via waiver claims, like Alek Manoah, Carson Ragsdale. This is his second time he's been with the team. They grabbed him off of waivers earlier in the year. Like, they kept grabbing guys off of waivers late in the year and giving them 40-man roster spots. At one point in time, they had 49 guys for 40 spots. Because again, if you're on the 60-day IL, it does not count towards a 40-man roster spot. But in the offseason, you're required to take everybody off of the 60-day IL and put them back on the 40. The 60-day IL does not exist in the offseason. And when you come back for spring training, by the way, if you're just curious how this works, when you come back for spring training, you can put a guy on the 60-day IL, but it doesn't start counting the 60 days until the season starts. You can put him on the 60-day IL in late February, right? AJ Smith-Shawver is going to go on it almost immediately. But it won't, like, his 60 days won't actually start counting those until opening day. Just a little side note. Not everybody realizes how that works. And if you're on the 15-day and you get shifted to the 60-day later, the 60 days starts counting from when you were originally put on the IL with the initial injury, not when you're shifted to the 60-day. So if you go on the 15-day IL today, this is obviously not today because it's the offseason, but if you were to go on today and in 2 weeks, they'd move you to the 60, you would already be 2 weeks into that 60-day time period. Some people get that wrong. I remember, was it 2 years ago? Michael Harris went on. They shifted him from the 15 to the 60 after like a month and a half, and everybody kind of freaked out thinking, is he going to miss 2 more months? No. He's going to miss like 2 more weeks. They just they needed a 40-man spot, and that was the move they made. He still was going to return in the same time frame he always was going to return in. But I have a couple theories about why the Braves went from 49 guys for 40 spots to where they currently sit with just 37. We'll talk about that next, right here on Braves Today. Final segment of Braves Today, Lindsay Crosby. I was surprised yesterday about the Rule 5 deadline. Kind of explained the Burkhalter thing. The rest of the guys, we talked about that on Monday, right? I didn't think Ian Meha was going to be a major leaguer at this point, and he doesn't fit any of these characteristics either, right? You look at some of the hitters, I don't necessarily, like, one of the main features for a hitter is defensive versatility. Like a lot of the position players, the guys last year, Christian Cairo, who the Braves took, second base, shortstop, third base, left field. Cooper Bowman, second base, third base, shortstop, center field. Liam Hicks of the Marlins, catcher and first base, right? Like David McCabe is a first baseman, third baseman, and he's not a very good third baseman. It didn't make a lot of sense. Most guys are up the middle. They have speed or defensive value to go along with the offensive prowess that they were showing in the minors. But my theories here as to why the Braves are at 37 spots and feel like they're kind of preserving 37 spots. I've got 2 different things that I want to throw at you, okay? So number 1, we know from Alex Anthopoulos, that the Braves are aggressively working on shortstop and starting pitching. But I think one of the issues here is we don't know how much that is going to cost. And I've run through some of the scenarios. We've talked about cutting a corner, right? And I think that in a best case scenario for your winter, it can be something where like Ha-Sung Kim signs for 2 years, $30 million. That's the MLB trade rumors aggregate prediction that they had, right? Chris Bassett, 2 years, $38 million. There's a starter, there's a shortstop. They didn't take a lot of money. And so you have the money for your bullpen, because if you have to add 2 or 3 arms, right, but you have plenty of money, you can go out and sign one of the big name closers, right? Maybe you get a Suarez. Maybe you get a Devin Williams. Maybe you bring Iglesias back. Maybe you run it back with Kenley Jansen, right? If you do that, try to get Ceddanne Rafaela from the Red Sox so we can just have the Curacao Avengers, like just have all of them together. And but you have plenty of money in that scenario, right? If you go Kim and Bassett and they're relatively cheap, you can grab a no doubt lockdown closer type. And then you can get, if Jimenez is back, you find out in January, if Jimenez is back, you get one back-end reliever and you call it a day. Like you're probably good to go ahead with just that, because if you think about at that point, your bullpen would be the closer you sign, the setup man you sign, and Jimenez, with behind them Dylan Lee, Aaron Bummer, and then whoever, Daisybel Hernandez, Grant Holmes is probably going to be in there as a swing man. I know that Jeremy Hefner likes swingmen, right? You're going to have him. Joey Wentz can start, can relieve. Another swingman like Jose Suarez can start, can relieve. You have 3 swingmen, longmen types, and 5 leverage relievers. It's not a bad bullpen for what Jeremy Hefner likes to do. But if you're in a scenario where you end up either popping a qualifying offer. I know we've discussed either way, this will or will not happen. But if you're in a scenario where you pop a qualifying offer, maybe it's at shortstop. Bo Bichette is projected 8 years, $208 million. Maybe it's at starting pitcher. Dylan Cease is projected for 7 years and $189 million. Maybe it's not a qualifying offer. Maybe it's a trade. Maybe it's Sonny Gray, who is getting paid $35 million in 2026, with another $5 million owed to him in 2027 if you decline the club option. Maybe it's Mitch Keller, who is signed for 3 years, but is owed like $56 million. Maybe it's another Atlanta max contract. Pablo Lopez is owed like $21.75. Maybe you go out and you take on more money from your starting pitcher trade, or a signing for shortstop or a bat, or whatever. Maybe it's Jake Mastriani's preference of Cody Bellinger. Maybe you bring in Cody Bellinger and you're paying him $25 or $30 million a year, whatever. If that happens, you may be in a scenario where you don't have the money to grab one lockdown, absolute just stud in the back end of your bullpen. Because signing a closer means that you're getting one ninth inning guy. And then if you have Joe Jimenez back and you've got Dylan Lee there, you're probably getting like a 7th inning guy and calling it a day. But if you don't have the money to sign one of those 9th inning guys, or you just don't want to commit the money that it takes to get those guys because there's one left and the price has gone nuts, and you end up having, or you don't have Joe Jimenez, and you have to get like 2 8th inning guys and hope one of them can become a closer, or 2 8th inning guys and a 7th inning guy. Having the extra roster spots becomes important. If you end up, you don't have Joe Jimenez, and you have to sign 3 relievers, plus your shortstop ad, plus your starting pitcher ad, then not adding these prospects at the protection deadline gives you additional roster flexibility, right? It gives you the ability to say, hey, we've got extra roster spots. We don't have to get rid of anybody that we like to do this. It's possible. I don't know if that's why they're keeping these spots open. But the other reason they could be keeping these spots open is something that they did last year. Having open roster spots right now is a competitive advantage against the rest of the league. Because a lot of the league, to protect their guys from the Rule 5 draft, they had to DFA veterans. They had to DFA guys that they ideally would have kept were it not for the roster crunch they were under. And so Atlanta could either A, look to sign a minor league free agent, and the competitive advantage here is being able to offer them a 40-man roster spot. We saw this last winter. Carlos Rodriguez, the outfielder, who ended up not getting called up by the Braves, but we didn't know that at the time. He was a minor league free agent after finishing up his team control with Milwaukee. And reportedly, I can't remember which Spanish language reporter it was, but one of the Spanish language reporters, maybe it was Hector Gomez, I don't remember who it was, said that like 20 different teams expressed interest in signing him. The reason he chose the Braves was because they not only had a 40-man roster spot, but they were willing to give it to him when he signed. Which does a couple things. One, it gives you just a little bit more protection, like job security, because it's harder to get rid of you. They have to intentionally designate you for assignment, pass through waivers, the rest of the league has a chance to claim you, all that stuff. So you may not have to go to the trouble of finding another job. Also, you get paid more when you're in the minors, but on the 40-man roster, right? In the new minor league CBA, they talked about the increased salaries for guys who are in the minors at every level. But if you're on the 40-man roster, you make more than that. Like a AAA salary in 2025, if you're there the entire season, is just under $37,000. It's not a ton of money. And not a lot of guys don't sign for giant bonuses. So like they're not making a ton of money. But if you're on the 40-man roster, you make more than that. You might make $74,000, or you can make up to $100,000 in the minors on the 40-man roster. A lot of that depends on, how long you've been a player and all that stuff. So that was a benefit for Rodriguez. But also now the list of guys who are free agents because they were DFA'd by their teams, Atlanta now has the roster spots to go sign any of those guys they want. Look at the outfield. J.J. Bleday of the Athletics, former first-round pick. He went to Vanderbilt. He's been good in the past. He was DFA'd by the A's on Tuesday night. The Rays DFA'd both Christopher Morel, who I'm going to call him a utility guy, but he's not good defensively anywhere. He hits the ball hard, though. And Jake Fraley, who was spent time this season on Atlanta's roster. They DFA'd him, so you could get him back if you wanted him. Alexander Canario, former top prospect of the Cubs, was with the Pirates, hits the ball hard. Joey Weimer, played in the Features game a couple years ago, was DFA'd by the Marlins. You go look at infield. Luis Vasquez has made starts at shortstop. This most recent year, he was DFA'd by the Orioles. Ramon Urias is a utility man with the Astros. They DFA'd him. You can look at pitchers. Nick Enright of the Guardians. He's having Tommy John surgery. They DFA'd him. If nobody tries to pick him up, they're going to sign him probably to a minor league deal and let him rehab. But you could always try a 1-and-1. You could try a deal where you give him a 40-man spot. He makes a minimal salary this year while he rehabs. You put him on the 60-day IL all year. And then you either have a club option or an automatic salary for 2026 of better money and get a good pitcher out of it. Tommy Henry of the Diamondbacks. Carson Spears of the Reds was a teammate of Spencer Strider's at Clemson. Throws 6 different pitches, including all 3 fastballs. Shout out Jeremy Hefner. And has experience as both a reliever and a starter in the same season. Maybe you grab him as a side armor. We saw what Jeremy Hefner was able to do with Sean Manaea by copying Chris Sale with Manaea, right? Lowering the arm angle, leaning into the horizontal game. Spears throws all 3 fastballs. He throws a sweeper. He throws a changeup. He throws a slider. He's already got a lower arm angle. It's like 34, 38 degrees or whatever. Maybe you grab Carson Spears on a deal right now, a smaller deal, league minimum or something small like that, and you get him in the lab, and you have him work with Chris Sale, who's on your roster, with the guy that copied Chris Sale onto Sean Manaea before his breakout 24. You have roster spots where you can do that. Not everybody else does. That's a competitive advantage for you. Maybe you want a former first-round pick outfielder. Maybe you want a pitcher that is an archetype that you have fixed before. Like, it feels like if you're saving roster spots, it's for one of those 2 reasons, right? Either you think you're going to need them to fill out your bullpen after you make your ads, or right now is the time you want to grab some guys as projects. Because if you can fix Carson Spears, and he can be either a Grant Holmes utility type pitcher from 24, or you can make him into a starter, even if he's a number 4 guy, the value between what you pay him and what you get out of him is enormous. So I'm guessing that's why these spots are open. And I'm guessing that's what Atlanta's going to do. We'll find out. And hopefully we start to get some actual movement in the free agent market. We saw Josh Naylor sign with the Mariners. Thought that was a really good deal for the Mariners. We've not really seen anything else other than that, other than the qualifying offer decisions. We'll break those down tomorrow and talk about what the starting pitcher market might look like now that some of those guys are off the board. Saw some surprising qualifying offer decisions. We'll break those down third segment of tomorrow's show. You guys said you liked the idea of third segment other MLB news that could impact Atlanta. Some of those starting pitchers taking their qualifying offers definitely could impact Atlanta because of now additional interest for guys at that tier. We'll talk about that tomorrow. This has been Braves Today for Wednesday, November 19th. Do me a favor, listening on audio, a 5-star review would be awesome. Awesome. Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and don't forget, bravestoday.com. Free or paid, those memberships, those subscriptions help us out a ton. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.